Okay, welcome to the third video in the Geography Skills series. And we're going to follow on from our last lesson on determining height and shape of land by looking at some examples of contour lines and the maps that we use to identify them. Okay, firstly, a couple of things I'll point out here is that where we see close lines, lines that are close together, running parallel, this equals steep land. So you can see in this area in here, if I can get my laser pointer. So right through here where the lines are close together, it's quite steep. And it's labelled there. Similarly, when lines are far apart, we have gentle sloping territory. Okay, so for example, between this line and this line, there's a big gap or a bit of distance between them. That indicates that it's relatively gentle and in some cases quite flat. Okay, so that's the second thing that I'd point out. Also, when the contour lines make small circles, this usually indicates a spot height. So for example, you can see a small circle in here where we have a little dot there with the number 92. That also indicates a spot height and indicates a high point. We have a high point also over here in the top right corner of 212 meters. And we even have a trig point on this map where we have the little dot, but it's got a triangle around it with the height of 232 meters. This should indicate to us that this is likely the highest point on the map. And I'm sure if we studied the map in more detail, we'd be able to work that out. Okay, the fourth thing I'd point out is that sea level is 0 meters. So we always start at 0 meters or sea level. And you can see here we've got a peninsula on here, but we've got the bay right here. Now, in terms of 0 meters above sea level, this would extend into the estuary and the river until we see a contour cross the river. And in this map, we do not see any of the contour lines that actually cross the river. So we're still at 0, possibly at 19 meters too, because our first contour line starts at 20 meters. So it's possibly somewhere between 0 and 20 meters that we see this river. Okay. So when we look at our contour lines, just to do some revision from our last lesson, okay, we worked out that these contour lines, in this case, they're black. You can see there's the number 20. It indicates that along that line is 20 meters above sea level. Okay, this one next to it is labeled 40. So along this line is 40 meters above sea level. And this one here is 60 meters above sea level. And you'll notice that lastly, we have a very small circle right in the middle. Okay, right in here. This indicates that we actually do cross over the 80 meter level because we have a contour line and the interval is 20 meters. So even though we cross over, we actually cross over the 80 meter mark, but we never cross over 100 meters. So the highest point where my mouse is pointing will indicate to us that this is somewhere between 80 and 100 meters height. Okay. It does not have a spot height on it, so we don't know the exact number, not like over here. This 212, where we actually have the little dot there indicating for sure that this is the high point. Okay. The other feature I'd point out here is that you'll notice that here's 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140. 140 line goes around this corner and works its way up here and disappears off the map. Okay, the one to the south of that line, this one here, if we trace that along, we work out that that's 120. So we know that from here down to here, it's downhill. And if we keep going, we get down into the 100 and finally down into the 80, or the, what's that one, the 60, then it's the 40, finally it's the 20, and then we go out to sea. So we know that this is downhill. Now, just going to get this open. We'll use blue. We also know that this direction down here is downhill. This is downhill. That's downhill. This is also downhill. Okay. These little grey lines here indicate a little land feature we refer to as a spur. So if you were to stand basically along this line and you're walking in this direction, you're heading downhill fairly gently, but it's steeper downhill that way and it's steeper downhill this way. So you're kind of walking along a descending ridge, if you like. You'll see that we cross the 60 line, work our way across here. We cross back over the 60 line. Okay, and that would indicate to us that we've been going downhill and we've gone then back uphill and finally over the 80. Okay, nice little view out to sea, standing on top of this knoll in every direction here, because we're at somewhere between 80 and 100 meters, whereas this is at 0 meters. So we've got a nice view over here. We've also got a nice view this way. Okay, and if we're looking in this direction, we've got a nice view all the way up the valley. Okay, so a lot of things to take into account here. All right. The other thing I'll point out here is that when we have a high point like we have there and another high point like we have here, but it drops down into a low point and then back up the other side, we refer to it as a saddle. Okay, one of the other land features that we see on contour maps. You see over here we've got another spur heading in this direction, and we have what's called a ridge. I would actually argue that the ridge is just this part in here. All right, probably just along here, because as we keep going this way, we're heading downhill along what we call a spur. So it's a very similar situation to what we have over there. Okay. So if you were to imagine, for example, that you were down here at the estuary at point A, and we'll put a little spot up here, okay? And you were heading on a bushwalk in which you want to try to get up to the top of the hill here. Probably the best direction to take would be to head towards this knoll. I might change colour here. So this might be your walking path. And you climb over the 20, over the 40, over the 60, and work your way up the spur all the way to the top. You've now crossed 140 meters heading up the hill. I would say, for example, you probably cut around the top of this gully and then head up the hill up to 212 and have your picnic and enjoy the views across the bay. So that's how we apply contour and contour lines and contour intervals. Keep an eye out for these trig points, keep an eye out for spot heights, and really pay attention to the numbers that we see that label the lines, because they tell us the height above sea level. In some cases, you have to look really carefully at these maps, because they can be, sometimes the lines can be very close together. For example, over here, where the lines are close together, you'll see that there are no labels. You've really got to trace it all the way along until you just find the label. So you see on this line here, for example, there's your 120 meter mark, and it goes all the way along here. Okay, that can be the challenge when you've got to follow a line along a fair way and work out which one it is. All right, so that's where you've got to really concentrate and pay a lot of attention in terms of interpreting and understanding contour intervals. That's lesson 3. Thanks for listening.